I'm reading today from, thank you, Rays of the One Light. These are weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, written by Swami Ananda and based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. This week's reading is Reincarnation, the Spiral Staircase. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. In the book of Revelations, Jesus Christ tells us, "Him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out." There is a difference between church dogmas, which are based on reasoned deductions from spiritual statements, and the pronouncements of wisdom, which are based on the inner realization of scriptural truths. Reason, like a train, can only follow already existing tracks of human experience. Human memory, being short, is seldom able to cross back over the threshold of a person's present existence. Biblical references to previous lifetimes on earth are overlooked in the deductive process, and we find them therefore excluded from the body of official dogma. Nevertheless, such references exist. The Bible itself presents them, as does Jesus in this passage, not as abstract teaching, but as direct personal perceptions of truth. In the same way, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita silences Arjuna's reasonable doubts on the subject, not by reasoned argument, but by the frank statement contained in the 4th chapter of that great scripture. Krishna says, "Arjuna, you and I have passed through many births. I know all of them, though you, O chastiser of foes, recalls them not. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind." So, today, my name is Nirmala. By the way, I'm going to leave my mask on just because Dharmadas and I are just getting over 2 weeks of COVID. We didn't have to go on respirators, thank God. And we've tested negative, so we're clear, but I still want to be a little bit cautious. And today I wanted to talk about a great saint that I've been reading a lot about recently, Saint Anthony of the Desert. And going to put in a cough drop to try to have a better voice. And our affirmation today was about determination and perseverance. And Saint Anthony is the poster child of that. When he was a young man, his parents passed away, and he inherited a huge ownership of land and money and all of this. And one day he was listening to the Sunday service that a priest was giving, and the priest talked about Jesus' words to the rich young man. "Sell all that you have, give it to the poor, and come and follow me." And this was like a revelation for Anthony. These were the direct words of Jesus. And he took them to heart. And he went out and he sold everything. He gave it to the poor. And then he was sort of like, what do I do now? Where do I go? What do I do? And the priest didn't really have much advice for him. In those days, some of the priests married, and so this man had a family, and he didn't know quite what to tell Anthony. So Anthony finally found an ascetic who was living on the outskirts of the little village. And this man led a very simple life, and he wove palm mats, little mats, for a living, very humble living. And so he taught Anthony how to do that. And with that little skill, Anthony went out into the desert, determined to meditate, to pray, to find direct experience of God. And through the years, Anthony would have this magnetism, this realization would come to him, and this divine quality that other people would come into the desert to do the same thing. And after a while, he would teach these disciples, really, about this simple life, about prayer, about loving God, total abject poverty. This weaving of the mats, he would have someone come every 6 months and bring him a little bit of food that would sustain him for the rest of the year. And in exchange, he would give these mats for this very, very austere life. But after a while, there would be so many anchorites, so many young people trying to live this life, and Anthony would teach them, and then he'd go farther out into the desert. And this happened over and over again. He would just go out farther and farther into the desolate desert, complete solitude. And there are many lessons to learn from his life. One is how to deal with temptation. When he was very new on this path, he was again going farther into the desert, when suddenly he saw in front of him a giant silver disc. Just imagine the wealth of this disc made entirely of silver, very precious metal. And Anthony, it was just tremendous wealth. But Anthony immediately said, I know this is trickery of the devil trying to keep me from God, trying to lure me with wealth. And as he said it, the disc just descended into the sand, disappeared completely into the sand through the power of his mind. And as he was walking farther, suddenly there was a boulder in his path made entirely of gold. Beautiful, glimmering, glistening in the sun, this incredible mound of gold. And Anthony again said, this is not real. This is a temptation of Satan. But the gold didn't disappear. His mind wasn't strong enough to make it disappear. And in fact, it was so beautiful that he just instinctively reached out to touch it, and then he pulled his hand back at the last second. He didn't touch it. But the temptation was so strong that this is what Anthony did. He took a running start, he jumped over it, ran as fast as he could, and he never looked back. So some temptations are like that. We just have to run for it. Get away with every ounce of energy that we have. And these temptations can come in any form. The television set, the cell phone in my case, all the things that distract us from God. Every time that we have a judgment thought, or doubt, or worry, or fear, all of these are temptations. we need to focus, as Anthony did, on loving God. So he found an abandoned temple, ancient, and Anthony lived, around 370, something like that, slightly into the 400s, I think. He lived to be 100 years old. But he was in this ancient ruined temple with friezes on the walls of animals, and he had incredible experiences where he was being tested and these animals would come to life and chase him and try to tear him to bits. And he would stay firm in his trust in God. He would not be swayed. He would say, my will for God is greater than the will of the world. And he just stayed focused, stayed trusting. And that's what we need to do. And eventually, he prayed so hard that the roof of the temple lifted up into the sky. The whole temple was filled with angels, and they lifted Anthony bodily up out of that tomb, really, and set him on a high mountain. And Christ appeared to him. And Anthony said, Lord, where have you been? I've been praying to you and praying all these years. Where were you? And Jesus said, Anthony, I was always with you. That is how he was able to do it, because Christ was with him. We think we do all these things on our own. But there's a beautiful story of another saint, a Sufi saint, Saint Romia. And one of her students came to her and said, so, Mother, if I study the scriptures and I am charitable to others and I practice all the teachings, will I be pleasing in the eyes of God? And Ramia said, no. If you go on pilgrimage and if you study the scriptures and if you are charitable and if you do all these spiritual things, you do it because you are pleasing to God. You do it because God is with you. You do it because He is doing it through you. It is He that's enabling us to sit here this morning and listen to these divine stories of great souls. Never doubt that He's with you. It's how we are able to even try to meditate, because He is right there in our hearts. So that's how Anthony was able to resist temptation. And there are many beautiful stories from his life, but one of the favorites that I love is that someone came to him in the desert. They found him. It was not easy. This happened several times, that through God's grace, people were able to find him, and they said to Anthony, the Christians are being tortured and killed for their faith. Please come and help. So Anthony did. He went to Alexandria. Long journey. And the Christians were imprisoned. And some of them were in the arena getting ready to be thrown to the lions. So they were all under heavy guard. But Anthony comes in, this tall, emaciated figure from so much fasting, so much tapasya, so much sacrifice. Tall figure, long white beard, long white hair, staff, dressed only in sheepskin. What a figure he must have cut. Wherever he went into the prisons, he went into the arena, he went wherever the Christians were being held under guard. Nobody stopped him. They were awe-stricken. They would not mess with this man. They were afraid his staff had some sort of magic in it, that he was a wizard or something. He went anywhere he wanted to go. And his message was simple. Have strength in your faith in God. Don't worry. If your life is sacrificed, you will find ever new life, everlasting life in heaven. Stay strong in your faith. And they did. The Christians were incredibly strong, and they had no fear going into the arena. They knew it was their ticket to heaven. So Anthony stayed strong. He had incredible presence. When the Orthodox Christians were trying through Constantine, Emperor Constantine, the Christianity became the official state religion. So all these officials who had been throwing the Christians to the lions were now getting religion and honoring all the Christians, which is so the way of the world, isn't it? Sometimes you're thrown to the lions, then you're exalted. It's just, you can't trust this world. It's too ridiculous. Anyway, so Constantine makes Christianity the state religion. But still there are dissenters within Christianity. Some are saying, how did it go? That Jesus and God were equal in essence. They were saying, as Jesus said, I and my Father are one. So they were talking about the divinity of Jesus, equal in essence. A divine incarnation, in other words. The dissenters were saying similar in essence. That Jesus was just a man. He didn't have a cosmic birth or anything special. He was born and he died. Maybe the resurrection, maybe not. They were just saying Jesus was a man. And what I find interesting is that they were talking, this was in Greek, and so the difference between equal in essence and similar in essence was just an iota. The smallest little Greek word, an iota of difference, which is where that saying comes now, that we still have. So again, emissaries went out into the desert. They found Anthony. And he had had a vision that the donkeys were in the temple and they were trying to upset the altar. And so when they asked Anthony to come, he immediately remembered that vision and he went again to Alexandria. And he went to a temple, a church where they were having a Sunday service. And he was sitting off to the side. The priest was giving this ceremony and then a talk. And suddenly there were hecklers in the audience, heckling and saying, no, Jesus wasn't divine, Jesus was just a man. And Anthony was so struck that there would be people interrupting a service like that. With a tango, no less. I'll pay you later for that. That was perfect timing. That Anthony stood up in the midst of this Sunday service, and all he said were 4 words. He said, I have seen him. And it completely shut down the whole Arian heresy. Seeing Anthony, hearing his words, people fell to their knees. They renounced the Arian heresy. And basically, Anthony in that moment saved Christianity, because there would be no Christmas without that divine entering into human form. There would be no Easter, the resurrection, eternal life. All the art, all the study, all the monasteries that saved civilization, all of that would be gone. So Anthony was an amazing instrument for God in that moment. Later, Emperor Constantine asked Anthony, how do I live the right way? And from all these centuries ago, the advice still holds. What Anthony told Constantine was, practice humility, have contempt for the world, and remember that you will have to account for all of your deeds. So these are Master's teachings, just slightly different words. Humility is ego transcendence. And Yogananda and Swami tell us that ego transcendence is the essence of the spiritual path. So when we are trying to work with our own psyche, with our own ego, trying to get rid of that ego, to transcend that sense of self, that's the most important thing we can do. It will lead to our freedom. We lose the little self so that we can attain the greater self. We have everything. We're just clinging to little straws. St. Francis used to tell his disciples, live in this world as though you are a pilgrim. You're not here for very long. You're just on a little pilgrimage. We've traveled so much and moved so many times. I think we stopped counting the times we moved at about 35 or so. And it was like, okay, forget it. We're not going to keep track anymore. And I often think of our house, a person's house is basically a hotel room where you can bring all your furniture. Live simply and as a pilgrim. So that humility that St. Anthony was talking about is ego transcendence. The less we think about ourselves, the happier we will be. That's why our path is meditation and service, because they go together, they feed each other. We have to serve something greater than ourselves if we ever want to be happy. Otherwise, the spiral staircase of reincarnation, it can go up and it can go down. So these words of Anthony and St. Francis and Ramia, they're all talking about continuing up that spiral staircase. Don't lose a step. And when Anthony says, have contempt for the world, it's not like you are angry and have this contempt. In our, in our age, we're not going off to the desert and just renouncing everything and wearing sheepskin. We're living in the world with that inner renunciation. And so keep the constant thought in our minds that this world is not our true home, that this world is not real in the ultimate sense. Remember Sri Yukteswar saying, what is the self? The self is a mere idea resting on a fragment of spiritual light. We are that light. And so contempt for the world means to realize its unreality and to go for ultimate verities, finding the truth. And last, Anthony's advice to remember you will be held accountable for all of your deeds is simply the law of karma. Equal and opposite action and reaction. So give your energy, give your love, give from your heart. I always think love and giving should always just hurt a little bit. Should always just have a little bit of pain when you're getting out your wallet to put something in the collection basket today. It should be a little bit of, oh, okay, yeah, I will give more. And with your energy too, yes, I will give everything I have. And so let us fill our minds not with the political strife in the world, the pain, the war, all of that's going on in the world. Yes, we can think of those things. And in consciousness, we can spiral down into thinking how terrible the world is right now. But instead, let's spiral our consciousness upwards and think about these ultimate truths that are timeless. Fill your mind with the teachings so that you can make good choices in life, because that will take you another step and another step upward on that spiral staircase. Live in God's light.
I'll just speak briefly. This topic, when I first encountered the concept of reincarnation, much like the reading, in the reading where Swami's talking about how it's kind of excluded from the traditional interpretations of Christianity, even though those different passages are right there in the Bible. They're sort of sitting there staring at us. You know, Christ asks the disciples, who do people say that I am? And they start replying, well, you know, this prophet, this other one. He could have corrected them right in the spot and said, you imbeciles, why are you talking about reincarnation? But he doesn't. The questioning goes on for a while. But I mean, those little bits and pieces are right there. But then the question comes up, well, so why don't we remember? And the interesting part is, do we even remember this lifetime? I mean, you roll a few decades together and things start to get a little fuzzy back there. And I'm struck by the thought that there's a phrase that has come into the language in the last while. It's on a need-to-know basis. And if you think of other lifetimes and how relevant that information is or is not, it's on a need-to-know basis. Because if we didn't have a fresh start in this incarnation, if we were hypnotized by all the momentum of all the self-identification from these other lifetimes, it would be overwhelming. Sometimes even just in one lifetime. Nirmala mentioned how many times we've moved across the planet or across the years or across the town, and it's quite a few. And I can tell you from all those different moves that it's like different incarnations. Moving to Italy was the end of an incarnation and the beginning of another one. Moving to India was even more so. Moving back, again, both moves back to this country were more difficult than the moves away in many ways. And so, you see these points of demarcation and you think, okay, well, that was a whole lifetime. How many incarnations? Oh my God, I mean, it's horrifying to think, really. You think of all the different dramas that play out. We don't necessarily need to know all that. In the yamas and niyamas, there's a fascinating, the non-attachment. Each yama and each niyama has a boon connected with perfection of that. And the one for non-attachment is to remember all your past lives. When you can be perfectly non-attached, even to this lifetime, even to whatever, then you're qualified to know all the previous ones, because then there's no sense of limitation around it. There's a lovely prayer, or not a prayer, but a lovely response. Sister Gyanamata, Yogananda's most advanced woman disciple, was asked about a previous incarnation because he had said something, I think, and word sort of got around in the ashram that she had been a saint in a previous lifetime. In fact, I believe the understanding was she had been Saint Teresa of Avila, who Nirmala has referred to a number of times, and wonderful, amazing saint. And her response, when she heard this rumor, was just amazing. She immediately wrote to Yogananda, and she said to him, "Whoever, whatever I was in another lifetime, in this lifetime, I am Gyanamata, the work of your hands." And if you think about that, it's not that she was negating, okay, I was a great saint in another lifetime. It's not that she was negating anything else that she ever was. She just brought it right here and right now. In this lifetime, I am Gyanamata, the work of your hands. And all of us would do well to go in front of the masters when we meditate. Go in front of God in whatever, the temple of our hearts, and just say, in this incarnation, I am yours, and I'm the work of your hands. Guide me to my own highest potential, that I may be one with you, and that I may be a channel for your blessings to all.